She slept in row 10, calm and unaware. Then the captain asked, "Any combat pilots on board?" The cabin froze. No one knew why he was asking, or what danger was flying beside them in the dark sky above the ocean. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Flight 782 left Frankfurt Airport late in the evening. It was heading to New York. The plane was full. 230 people sat inside, tired after a long day. Some read books. Some watched movies on small screens. Some closed their eyes and tried to sleep. The engines made a steady sound, like a soft song that never stopped. In row 10, seat B, a woman was sleeping. Her name was Emily Carter. She had short brown hair that covered part of her face. She wore simple clothes, a gray jacket and blue jeans. She looked like any other tired traveler. No one on the plane knew who she really was. To everyone around her, she was just a quiet woman resting during a long flight. The plane had been flying smoothly for almost 3 hours. The sky outside was dark now. Stars had started to appear above the clouds. Inside the cabin, the lights were low. Most passengers were half asleep. It felt like a normal, peaceful night flight. Then, without warning, a sharp sound came from the front of the plane. It was a chime from the cockpit, a signal that something was wrong. A flight attendant near the front turned pale. She walked quickly toward the cockpit door, her steps fast and nervous. Other flight attendants exchanged worried looks. A few seconds later, the captain's voice came through the speakers. His voice was calm, but there was something heavy in it, something that made people sit up in their seats. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are dealing with a situation. If there are any combat pilots or military personnel on this flight, please make yourself known to the crew right away." The cabin went quiet. Then whispers started. Passengers looked at each other in confusion. Combat pilots? Why would the captain need a combat pilot on a passenger flight? What could be happening outside, so high above the ocean? In row 10, Emily's eyes opened. The captain's words had cut through her sleep instantly. She did not wake up slowly like most people. She woke up sharp and alert, the way she had been trained to wake up years ago. Her body remembered things her mind had tried to forget. Emily had once been Major Emily Carter of the United States Air Force. For more than 10 years, she had flown F-16 fighter jets in dangerous missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. She had faced enemy aircraft. She had survived situations that would have ended most pilots' lives. She had more confirmed victories in the sky than anyone else in her squadron. But 2 years ago, she had left that life behind. She wanted a quiet, normal life. She wanted to walk through an airport without anyone knowing her past. Now, sitting in row 10, she understood the danger was real. She could feel it in her chest, the same feeling she used to get before a mission. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. A flight attendant walking down the aisle noticed her immediately. Something about the way Emily stood, calm but ready, told the attendant this was not an ordinary passenger. "I am a combat pilot," Emily said simply. Her voice did not shake. The flight attendant's face changed from fear to relief. She nodded quickly and led Emily toward the front of the plane. As Emily walked down the aisle, passengers turned to look at her. Some whispered to each other. Others just stared in silence. They did not know her name or her story, but they could sense she was different. She carried herself like someone who was used to taking control in hard moments. The cockpit door opened, and Emily stepped inside. The captain was an older man, maybe in his late 50s. His face was pale, and small drops of sweat had formed on his forehead. The first officer beside him kept glancing at a screen, his hands slightly shaking. "Tell me what is happening," Emily said, her voice firm and clear. The captain took a deep breath. "We have a serious problem. Air traffic control warned us about a possible rogue aircraft nearby. It has no transponder signal and is not responding to any radio calls. It has been following us for the last 20 minutes, staying close but never leaving. We tried to contact it many times. Nothing. We are not trained for this kind of situation. We do not know what to do. Emily leaned closer to the radar screen. Her eyes moved quickly, studying the small blip that followed their own aircraft's position. It was too close to be a coincidence. Something, or someone, was tracking them on purpose. Do you have anything with visual magnification? Binoculars, anything like that? She asked. The first officer handed her a small pair of binoculars used for checking navigation lights. Emily raised them to her eyes and looked out through the cockpit window into the darkening sky. For a moment, she saw nothing but clouds and the last orange light of sunset. Then she saw it. A small, dark aircraft, flying dangerously close, with a shape she recognized right away. It was an old fighter jet, the kind sometimes used by rogue groups or unofficial military forces. Her stomach tightened. This was not an accident. Someone was hunting them. The captain's voice trembled. What do we do? We have 230 people on this plane. If they attack us. Stop, Emily said firmly, cutting him off. If they wanted to attack, we would already be gone. They are testing us. They want to see if we panic. We will not give them that. She turned to the crew, and for the first time in 2 years, her voice carried the same weight of command she used to have in the cockpit of a fighter jet. I need access to the radio system. Patch me into any available frequency. If they are listening, I might be able to make them back off. For the next several minutes, the entire cockpit focused only on Emily. She adjusted the radio frequencies carefully, speaking in short, clear phrases, the kind used in military communication. Her voice changed completely. It was no longer the voice of a tired passenger. It was the voice of an experienced fighter pilot, sharp and unafraid. Unidentified aircraft, this is United States military authority speaking from civilian Flight 782. You are violating international airspace protocols. Identify yourself immediately, or you risk military engagement. There was silence. Then static. Then, finally, a voice came through, rough and unfriendly. This airliner does not belong here. Change your course, or we will engage. The captain's face lost even more color. The passengers in the back of the plane had no idea how close they were to real danger. They sat quietly, unaware of the tense moments happening just a few meters away, behind a closed cockpit door. Emily's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. She had faced threats like this before, though never with 230 innocent lives depending on her words. She spoke into the radio again, her tone colder this time. You are making a serious mistake. Military aircraft are already tracking your position. If you fire on this plane, you will not survive long enough to see the ocean below you. It was a bluff. Emily had no real confirmation that military aircraft were anywhere near them. But her voice carried something that could not be faked, the confidence of someone who had truly sat inside a fighter jet during real combat. Years of training were speaking through her now, not fear. There was a long pause. On the radar screen, the small blip shifted slightly, keeping its distance but not leaving. Then, without warning, it turned sharply and disappeared into the clouds. Emily kept watching the radar screen until the signal completely vanished. Only then did she let out a slow breath. The cockpit fell silent. The captain leaned back in his seat, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. My God, he said quietly. You may have just saved all of us. Emily nodded, but her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline that had kept her focused during the crisis was fading, leaving behind an old, familiar fear, one she had carried since her days flying in combat. She looked out through the cockpit glass at the dark sky, and for a moment, she was somewhere else entirely. She was back in the desert skies, dodging danger, fighting to stay alive in missions that never left her memory completely. Then, just as quickly, she returned to the present. It was not the desert anymore. It was a commercial airplane, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, carrying passengers who had trusted their lives to a crew that did not know what almost happened above them. When Emily walked back into the main cabin, something had changed. Word had spread quietly among the passengers that something serious had occurred in the cockpit. As she made her way back to row 10, quiet applause broke out. Some passengers looked at her with wide eyes, full of respect. Others whispered thanks as she passed. But Emily did not smile or speak much. She simply walked to her seat and sat down, pulling the seat belt across her lap the same way she had done at the start of the flight. She closed her eyes again, leaning her head against the window, just like before. To the people around her, she had become something like a hero, someone who had appeared out of nowhere to protect them all. But to Emily, it did not feel like heroism. It felt like just another mission, one she had not asked for but had accepted without hesitation. The plane continued its journey through the night sky, calm once again. The passengers slowly returned to their books, their movies, their quiet rest. The danger was gone, but something about the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. People sat a little closer together. Conversations were a little quieter. Everyone understood, without needing to say it out loud, that something important had just happened above the clouds. An hour passed. The captain came on the intercom once more, this time with a lighter tone. He thanked the passengers for their patience and mentioned nothing about what had truly happened, only that a technical issue had been resolved. Most passengers accepted this explanation. They did not need to know the full truth. But a few, especially those who had seen Emily walk to and from the cockpit, understood that the real story was far more serious than any technical issue. Emily did not open her eyes again for the rest of the flight. She let herself rest, though sleep did not come easily. Her mind kept replaying the moment she had seen the dark aircraft through the binoculars, the moment she had spoken those firm words into the radio, not knowing if they would work. She thought about the 230 people around her, none of whom would ever fully understand what she had done for them that night. She thought about her years in the Air Force, the missions she had flown, the friends she had lost, and the reasons she had finally chosen to leave that life behind. She had wanted peace. She had wanted to disappear into an ordinary life, far from cockpits and radar screens and enemy aircraft. But tonight had reminded her of something important. No matter how far she traveled from that world, a part of it would always stay with her. Her training, her instincts, her courage, these things did not disappear just because she had taken off her uniform. As the plane crossed further over the ocean, the sky outside grew darker, filled with stars that stretched endlessly in every direction. Inside the cabin, most passengers had fallen asleep, unaware of how close they had come to real danger. The engines continued their steady hum, carrying everyone safely toward New York. Emily finally allowed herself to relax. Her shoulders, which had been tense since the moment she woke up to the captain's announcement, slowly loosened. She thought about landing, about walking through the airport like any other passenger, blending into the crowd once again. No interviews, no headlines, no medals for what she had done tonight. Just a quiet return to the ordinary life she had built for herself. But she knew, deep inside, that ordinary life would always carry this hidden part of her. She was not just a tired traveler in row 10. She was someone who had once protected the skies for her country, and even now, in civilian clothes, without a fighter jet or a squadron beside her, she had done it again. Quietly. Without asking for anything in return. Hours later, as the first light of morning began to appear on the horizon, the plane started its descent toward New York. Passengers began to wake up, stretching, checking their phones, preparing for landing. Emily opened her eyes as the plane broke through the clouds, revealing the city skyline in the distance, tall buildings catching the early sunlight. The flight attendant who had first noticed her the night before walked past and gave her a small, grateful smile. Emily returned the smile but said nothing. Some things were better left unspoken. The plane landed smoothly. The wheels touched the runway with a gentle bump, and passengers clapped, as they often do after a long flight, though most of them clapped simply because they were happy to have arrived safely, not knowing how close they had come to a very different outcome. As passengers gathered their bags and prepared to leave, Emily stood up from row 10 like everyone else. She grabbed her small carry-on bag and joined the line moving toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one asked for her name. She walked off the plane just as quietly as she had boarded it, disappearing into the crowded airport, becoming, once again, just another traveler among thousands. But for those who had been on Flight 782 that night, row 10 would never be just an ordinary seat again. It was where a woman with a hidden past had woken from sleep, faced a hidden danger, and saved every single person on board, without ever needing to fire a single shot. And though the world outside that plane would never know her name, the 230 people she had protected would carry that memory with them for the rest of their lives. Inside the airport, Emily walked slowly through the long, bright hallway leading to baggage claim. Around her, other passengers from the flight moved past, dragging suitcases, checking phones, calling loved ones to say they had landed safely. None of them noticed her anymore. She had already faded back into the crowd, just another tired traveler at the end of a long night. Near the baggage carousel, the captain passed by her, wheeling his small crew bag. He paused for a moment and looked at her, his eyes still carrying the weight of what had happened hours earlier. He did not say anything loudly. He simply nodded, a quiet gesture of respect between two people who understood something the rest of the passengers never would. Emily nodded back, and then he walked on, disappearing into the crowd of pilots and crew members heading toward the staff exit. Emily collected her single bag from the carousel and walked toward the exit doors. Outside, the morning air of New York felt cool and fresh against her face. Cars moved along the road, taxis waited in long lines, and the noise of the city rose around her like a familiar song. She stood there for a moment, breathing it in, letting the ordinary sounds replace the memory of static and radio silence from the night before. She thought briefly about calling someone, telling them what had happened. But she decided against it. Some stories were better kept quiet, folded away like an old photograph. She raised her hand for a taxi, and within minutes, she was inside, watching the city pass by the window. Somewhere behind her, an aircraft was already being prepared for its next flight, and somewhere far away, life would go on as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Only she would remember the truth of that night above the clouds.